Hey, hi, hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of the Hardwood Knocks podcast. I am Dan Favale coming at you with my super duper, incredibly esteemed, awesome times awesome, fantabulous, spectaculario, doesn't want the Sacramento Kings to trade for Kyle Kuzma because he wants his Utah Jazz to give up even more to get Kyle Kuzma co-host, Andrew D. Bailey. Before we get started today, I just want to get through our usual housekeeping notes. First and foremost, please continue subscribing to Hardwood Knocks on iTunes. We can also be found wherever else you are getting your podcast. Subscribe to us, rate, review us there as well. But iTunes is still the best way to let us know that you're out there and that you're listening. So if you can, even if you do get your podcast somewhere else, go into Apple Podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe to us. It really helps us out. Make sure you're downloading every episode. The ratings and reviews are important. They've been a little stagnant of late, so we would appreciate any and all help that we could get on that front. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com, search Hardwood Knocks. We will come up. Subscribe. Like all our videos. You can check out all our podcasts, which are uploaded there as well. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Hardwood Knocks. Follow Andy on Twitter at Andrew D. Bailey. I am at Dan Favale, Favale. And please follow the podcast network of Blue Wire at Blue Wire Pods. With all of that out of the way, we get to the question that everyone loves hearing the answer to. Andy, how the hell are you doing?
I am doing great. The lead-ins are getting more outrageous every single episode we have. I do not want Kyle Kuzma on the Utah Jazz.
That's not what you told me off air. You were like Donovan Mitchell and filler for Kyle Kuzma.
Scrub that from the recesses of your memory. Get it off the internet, even though it's not on there yet, and it will be, and the internet never forgets, all that stuff. I'm doing good, though. I'm excited to talk about some NBA rumors.
Yes, we are doing our NBA trade rumor mill roundup. I was actually going to say that we should do a trade target for every NBA team, break it up East and West before we actually recorded this, but the rumor mill has been not surprisingly busy, but it all of a sudden went from like 0 to 60 or 0 to maybe like 80. It's not quite 100 just yet, considering what we're used to. But there were a lot of rumors to get through. One of the most recent ones and the biggest ones that became a thing on Twitter is that Mark Stein of the New York Times reported the Kings had contacted the Lakers about trading for Kyle Kuzma and knew that they would have to give up Bogdan Bogdanovic and other stuff as well. That report was shot down by Sam Amick, Jason Jones, and then other writers who were clued into the Kings, which sort of made it seem like Sacramento, after maybe perhaps seeing the reaction or just their initial report in general, sent out a mass text to everyone to really knock that down. What do you make of it? And the thing that I'll point out quickly, just for the logistics, is that the other stuff was bizarre because Bogdanovic is better than Kyle Kuzma, and it's not even close. But also, Bogdanovic makes $8.6 million, and Kyle Kuzma is still on his rookie scale and makes a grand total of slightly under $2 million. And so he has a year left of team control at $3.6 million. So if the Kings are scared of losing Bogdanovic in restricted free agency, you get the logic here, but it's one, the wrong player, and two, if they were actually in consideration to give up other stuff, whatever that may be, that's a problem. So there would need to be other players to make this work, and there better not be other assets exchanging hands from Sacramento if this deal were to go through, which again, it has since been shot down, or at least there are reports that made it seem like Sacramento was lukewarm on getting Kyle Kuzma.
You will be shocked to know that I wrote an article about possible landing spots for Kuzma, and the Lakers fans thought I undervalued him. So they may. And sorry to interject, but I made a Photoshop of a trade machine thing where the reaction was a little bit different. But after seeing it, they started saying that giving up Avery Bradley and Kyle Kuzma for Bogdanovic was way too much. And so they were trying to figure out ways to not give up Bradley. And then there were some slightly serious, not in the mentions, but I saw that basically along the lines of, hey, maybe the Lakers could get De'Aaron Fox too. Who knows? Like that is, I think that's a minority of Laker fans, but that is, regardless of whether it's the minority or even less than the minority, that's some strong ass exceptionalism. It's very, very strong. They think that he's like the value of a superstar 21-year-old I don't know what else to say. He's 24. I don't think he's ever had an above average true shooting percentage. In fact, I'm sure that he hasn't. Defense is a big problem for him. He doesn't do a ton beyond scoring. Somebody commented or replied to me and said, this, trash article is treating Kyle Kuzma like he's a second round pick. And I don't think I went that far, but if we were to try to encapsulate his value in terms of, what kind of pick is it? I think he's kind of like a late first right now, maybe. Maybe no, he has a little more value than that because we've at least seen him, he can average double figures. And I think there's more value to that than the question mark you get in a draft pick, but he's not as valuable as a lot of people think that he is. And he's not going to get the Lakers some ridiculous haul back. Like it's going to be another role player. That's what they're getting for Kyle Kuzma if they do make that trade. And they have to attach other contracts to his because, as you pointed out, he makes less than $2 million this year. And if you're going to get anybody other than like Alec Burks, who's going to be a contributor to this Lakers team, you have to attach contracts to Kuzma's to make the money work. Some of the names I came up with was like Etuan Moore, Jay Crowder, obviously Bogdan Bogdanovic. I had to include him in the article. Alec Burks was one that I threw in, and the money is weird on that one because Kuzma actually makes more than Burks, and the Warriors are hard capped, so that one got a little bit weird. But I think what they're going to get back is a role player. They cannot be expecting anything more than that, and I think fans shouldn't be expecting anything more than that either.
Yeah, and look, there's I don't even know. You might even be being a little bit generous with saying that he's maybe the equivalent of a mid first round pick. And you're right. There's value in the known, and we know that he can score, not most efficiently, but we've seen him do it with the ball in his hands. He was absurd in isolation during his rookie campaign. But there definitely is some red flags where I know he's had injuries this season and last year's roster was kind of a mess, but the fact that he hasn't really been able to find a niche in the LeBron James era where his job in theory should be getting a lot easier, that's certainly not great. And the thing that stood out more to me for this is that if the Lakers are even in the conversation for Kuzma, and we should have prefaced everything we say with that we know that tis the season of leaks and agendas. And so if these rumors are being leaked, we might all be being taken for fools. And so we always interpret these reports with a grain of salt. Just the fact that the report said the Kings contacted the Lakers, maybe the Lakers leaked that out. I don't know. It was just, that was bizarre. But if the Lakers, with what they can offer, are in play for Bogdanovic, there better be at least another dozen teams calling the Kings trying to get Bogey. The Sixers, he'd be a great fit there. He'd be a great fit on so many teams. He's like, I don't know that I wouldn't say he's like timeline proof, but there could be bad teams that are rebuilding that could be interested in him if they don't think his restricted free agent market is going to be particularly robust. He turns 28 in August, but particularly contenders for someone who's proven that he can shoot, do a little creation off the dribble, maybe even play some point guard for you. There are bigger defensive liabilities on the wings than him. That's maybe the highest defensive compliment I could really give him. Maybe the Kings then did let that rumor leak to see if they could drive up the price for him. And so that's something I thought about. And I'm wondering if there are any teams, I think, again, a bunch of them you can make a case for, but if there are any teams specifically that you think would make sense aside from the Lakers for Bogdanovic, because he is a great fit there. But again, I feel like this applies to so many different situations.
Yeah, there was I don't think this was a rumor, but it's kind of been my sort of go-to destination for him since it was written. But Jonathan Charks for The Ringer wrote about how he would be a good fit for the Bucks. This has been probably 2 months ago now, so I think he makes a little bit of sense there. I think they've mostly cobbled together what they lost with Malcolm Brogdon's departure. George Hill has been fantastic. All those youngish wings like Dante DiVincenzo and Pat Connaughton have been pretty good. But I think Bogdanovic would raise their ceiling even, just a little bit more, and maybe they can put together 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 of those contracts for the young guys and get him. That's an interesting location to me. If if there is some fire to this smoke and he actually does end up on the Lakers, I mean, that's huge. I think that makes them significantly bigger. Their biggest question mark is depth to me still. If they lose Davis or LeBron for some significant stretch, or, God forbid, in the playoffs, they're going to be in deep, deep trouble. So if they can get another guy who's, truly helpful, like I think Bogdanovic could be, that's a big one. I haven't thought real hard about other possible landing places for him. What are some that are sticking out to you?
Milwaukee is one that definitely stood out. That's like a fantastic one. I already said Philly. Orlando could really use someone like that. If you're looking at maybe just like contender specific teams, maybe the Heat would look at giving up one of their young pieces plus filler for him. Indiana could also use him, but they are going to get Victor Oladipo back. I'm sure Houston would love to have him too. They have enough shot creators though, and matching any sort of salary for them is basically tough. I saw some people mention Dallas. They have the best offense in the league, and I would rather see them get a wing that can play more defense. It's the same with Denver. Their defense has sort of slipped off since the Nikola Jokic resurgence, but I think you could also argue that maybe they need another layer of shot creation. Again, Bogdanovic isn't, creating a ton of these from scratch looks in Sacramento, but he does have the ability, I think, to do more of that. A slightly under the radar interesting team could be the Nets, just because it doesn't. I'd be shocked now if Kyrie Irving plays again this season.
Yeah,
he did have the cortisone shot in his shoulder to see if that works, but it just seems like they're not even going to reevaluate him for a few weeks. And then if that doesn't work, they're going to have to go the surgery route, which will keep him out 3 to 4 months. That's another little news item here. And so if he doesn't cost a ton, maybe you're interested in having him, but then you create this weird logjam next year where you have Karis LeVert, let's say you re-sign Bogdanovic, and then you have Irving and Dinwiddie and Kevin Durant. So that might be just a little bit of a stretch, but those are all teams that I think you can make a case for. Atlanta could certainly use him, but I just don't, they shouldn't be buyers, even though, spoiler alert, they might have interest in Andre Drummond.
Yeah.
Before we get to that rumor though, fun fact about Kyle Kuzma, since dyeing his hair, he has made fewer threes than LaMarcus Aldridge, who is all of a sudden just shooting a ton of threes, and I love it.
That's not a good sign for Kuzma, though.
That's deep dive analysis, though.
Yeah, for sure.
A couple of names that might have floated under the radar at the rumor mill with the Kings sort of kingsing. The New York Post Mark Berman reported that the Philadelphia 76ers may have interest in Marcus Morris. I'm going to tell everyone right now, the Philadelphia 76ers are not trading for Marcus Morris. They can't match his salary.
That's what I was going to say. Who would they even send?
Yeah, it's $15 million. And so without sussing out a third and fourth team and doing a wild 4-for-1, they're just not getting to the requisite salary number. They could maybe do a 3-for-1. So if you were going to do a straight up trade with the Knicks, though, you would have to give up a core piece. You're not going to do that for Marcus Morris. The Clippers were mentioned as well. They almost signed him in free agency per multiple reports, and they can make a deal work. You have that Mo Harkless expiring salary. They can flip a first-round pick. Maybe they even include Jerome Robinson in that deal as well. They might be interesting. Morris has said that he likes it in New York and wants to stay there. But if I'm the Knicks, and he's been, let me make this clear, he has been extremely good. And by this point last year, I think his hot shooting numbers were already falling off. They really have yet to fall off this year. He is shooting 44.1% on off the dribble threes this season. Just been an absolute offensive monster for them. The Knicks need to trade him because I think they could get the equivalent of a first round pick or prospect with a couple years left on his deal for him. And you just throw out, potential contenders that might be interested in him or teams that are really looking to make a push for the playoffs. Portland is a team that has stood out for me, and they have expiring contracts and can give up a young player or a pick. He would be like an okay fit in Milwaukee if they could cobble together the necessary salary for him. Philly, again, just doesn't have the salary matching fodder. I'd be curious what other teams might come out of the woodwork. We mentioned the Clippers already. I'm sure the Lakers would kind of like him, but when you're playing two bigs at the same time and given how much money they need to cobble together, that's where sort of the real issue comes in and what might or what will, in my opinion, limit his trade market. Dallas, too. I think he'd be a good fit in Dallas because he's kind of a cross-position wing that'll give you more defense than some of the other guys that you have on your roster with that extra, just a better blend of shot making and defense. So that might be another team to watch. Denver, sort of iffy on, just because I do think he needs to play a good amount of minutes at power forward, and with the emergence of Michael Porter Jr., you have Paul Millsap and Jeremy Grant. That doesn't really make too much sense. But I think there would be a team out there that would be willing to give the Knicks an expiring contract, even if they have to take on an extra year. I'm pretty certain that they'd get a first-round pick or prospect for him.
Yeah, he's got to get traded. He's having a ridiculously good season. He's averaging a career high 19.1 points per game. You mentioned his off the dribble 3-point percentage, which is a little more impressive than what I'm about to say, but still 47% on all threes is fantastic. Rebounding a little bit. I think he's going to help somebody for sure. You mentioned a lot of potential suitors, and I think we were right to, and I don't know if you and I did this, but there was a lot of sort of hand wringing over the Knicks this summer because they had basically promised that they were going to get Durant and Kyrie, and they missed out. But I think their backup plan was pretty good. They got a bunch of veterans that I assumed they knew that they'd have some trade value in the season, and they structured their contract so that they, would increase that trade value. And Marcus Morris has played better than I think even the Knicks could have imagined. I think he's played better than the Spurs could have imagined. And so he's played himself into a very, very real shot to get moved. Like you said, maybe that's not what he wants, but at this point, it's hard to imagine a different outcome for him. I mean, the Knicks have to be sellers at the deadline. I don't know if they're going to, get a ton of assets for all these veterans that they have, but Marcus Morris is a guy that should certainly bring them at least one.
I think you're being way too kind to what the Knicks did over the summer. I know they didn't hand out bad contracts per se. At the same time, one or two of those spots should have been used to try and get in on the salary absorptions when you look at the Andre Iguodala, Mo Harkless. So that is, to me, inexplicable and unforgivable for them. No, don't need to talk about the Knicks offseason anymore, though. The other name that I think we always kind of knew was going to be just officially in the rumor mill was Davis Bertans of the Wizards, who just thinks it's illegal to miss from three, basically, this season. It has the ultimate green light in Washington. This report is from Trace Hughes of NBC Sports Washington, who says that basically the Wizards aren't actively shopping Bertans, but teams are calling about him. And among those suitors are the Sixers, Hawks, Lakers, Celtics, and this one surprised me a little bit, the Nuggets. Of those teams, so again, Sixers, Hawks, Lakers, Celtics, and Nuggets, who makes the most sense for you?
I think he helps whatever team he goes to. He's just such a natural. You just put him out there and let him shoot, and so I think he's a good plug and play option for any of those teams. The Sixers, I think, need shooting. I was going to say maybe more than the rest of those, and I'm thinking the Lakers need some shooting too. But
here's my thing with the Sixers: I feel like they need a playmaker more than they need someone who's just going to stretch the floor for them. And so I wouldn't want to see them cash in, a pick and or prospect plus filler. And Davis Bertans at least doesn't make too much money. I just wouldn't want, if they were going to play their best hand this season, which I do think that they have the timeline to, I don't think I'd want it to be for Davis Bertans.
Kyle Newbeck had a good article for Philly Voice either yesterday or 2 days ago where he was saying that the Sixers actually need more guys who can create and give Ben Simmons an opportunity to do some other things, like be a screener in the pick and roll, stuff like that. So I would agree with you there. I thought that was a good point. My biggest thing with Bertans is, how old is he now? Like 27?
Yeah, I think he might even be 28, actually. Double check that. So
27 years old. So, and he just turned 27 in November. If I'm why don't the Wizards just want to keep him? And maybe they do, because I think a lot of the Wizards writers have basically said that, these calls are coming in one direction. The guy is shooting now 43.4% from three on 8.6 attempts per game. He's not like, we talk about timelines a lot, but I think sometimes that's overblown. Like it shouldn't be that big of a deal that you have a guy who's 3 or 4 years older than the rest of your young pieces if he's good and if he fits. I mean, this is a guy who's going to be hitting threes with great regularity for the next 4 or 5 years. I think Washington's going to have to be sort of blown away to move Davis Bertans.
I'm sort of with you, but at the same time, unless you're just dead set on continuing along with the Bradley Beal, John Wall core, I don't know that you want to risk going into free agency and seeing him get more than mid-level money where all of a sudden you're locked into Bertans for $12 million a year over the next 3 or 4 years. And he seems like one of those guys who might sign a longer contract just because he is a career role player. He's on the older side, and so maybe he jumps at the chance to sign a 4-year deal. Perhaps his next deal is eminently tradable, and that helps. But I could see the logic. Who else are they going to
spend that $12 million on, though?
Well, they're not flush with cap space this summer, so nobody, I guess you could say. But is that if you sign Bertans at, let's say, 4 years and $50 million, is that deal easy to move?
I think so. Because now you're looking at a contract that's 10% of the cap going forward. I think everything in that like 5 to 15 million range is going to be very tradable for the next few years, whether it's Bertans or somebody else. That to me is like, that's sort of the sweet spot for tradable contracts.
That's fair enough. I don't understand the Nuggets' interest unless they're just hoping to have another option in case Paul Millsap leaves, and so then you can play, and you have Plumlee coming off the book, so then you have the options of and Grant as well. So I'm just running through all these names. Then you have the option of keeping one of those many bigs. I wouldn't, if I were them just looking at all the personnel they have, I wouldn't want to waste whatever young player or future pick that I'm going to give up in any deal on Bertans. I think the Hawks.
I think he would be amazing next to Jokic, but the concern is very real that they've already got a bunch of these tweener forwards. Basically, I'm with you.
The Hawks would be interesting as well, but they need to stop looking at players who are entering free agency that they're going to give up assets for because they can sign these guys with cap space. I think the Lakers and Celtics need him the most, and I like him on the Celtics most. I know people want to see them get a burlier big, but one, they might be able to have a better chance of doing that on the trade market, and maybe there's a path to them if they have, with their wings and with Marcus Smart, they can kind of coax Joel Embiid into more jump shots. Maybe they don't need to have that, Al Horford type player to go and try and stop Joel Embiid. Now the two specifically are teammates, and it'd be interesting to see them run lineups with him at the 5. And so that would be my favorite landing spot. The Lakers maybe, just because if you have him, then you're presumably going to invest more time in Anthony Davis at the 5, which I still think the numbers have been wonky this year, but I still think that that's his best position.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, on the Celtics, I think he would be. I think on either of those teams, those last two that you mentioned, I think he'd be really good. For Boston, there has been talk about them. They need to get a center. I think they're kind of set at center. They've got a lot of versatility there. I think Daniel Tice is a solid defender. Cantor is a great offensive center, and then Robert Williams is like your potential shot at something really good, in my opinion. And so I think sacrificing the versatility they have, the positionless basketball that they can play with those 3 wings, I think Bertans would add to that versatility, I think, a lot more than like a traditional back to the basket center would. And then for the Lakers, I think, he would make a ton of sense. What's Bertans? He's making $7 million a year. So they'd have to do like Kuzma, Bradley.
I think that does it.
You think that would do it?
Oh, I don't. I mean, if I'm the Wizards,
what I was going to say is like, do you have to add a pick? And then it gets tricky because the Lakers just spent like all their draft capital.
Right, and it's a little bit different because you're not going to have Davis Bertans handle the ball. And so if I'm the Lakers, I actually wouldn't give up more than that. If it was Bogey, again, I would. So it would have to be Kyle Kuzma and filler for me. Like that would be my best offer, which I actually think is probably more than fair considering what Bertans.
I was going to say, I still think that's a decent offer. Like I didn't mean to like pan Kuzma earlier in this podcast during that article that I wrote. Like I do still think he has some value. So that's an interesting deal to me.
On to some rumors that have been just widely talked about. So Woj reported leading into the weekend that the Hawks and the Pistons have had conversations about a Drummond swap, and basically what it boils down to is that it would be the Brooklyn Nets pick, which will convey to Atlanta if they make the playoffs this season, and if not, then I think by 2021 or 2022, whenever they make the playoff next, essentially, and filler, which the Hawks have plenty of. That would be the deal for Andre Drummond. I hard pass if I'm the Hawks here. I wanted to know what you sort of thought about that.
Well, the Hawks, believe it or not, have been sort of my target destination for Drummond for 2 or 3 months now. I've written about it probably at least 2 or 3 times just this season alone for Bleacher Report, so it makes sense to me. The obvious retort is, why would they trade anything for Drummond if they can just sign him as a free agent? And I think that's more than fair. And I think if you're taking a wise sort of conservative approach to team building, that's what you would do. Just wait till he's a free agent and spend the cap space on him instead of giving up a pick. I guess maybe a little bit of pushback is, well, the Lakers were going to do that with Paul George, and then he wound up somewhere else. Now, obviously, the Lakers are fine now. They're very much real title contenders. They got a better player eventually in Anthony Davis. But there is always that risk, I guess, that if you let the guy enter free agency, he could just choose somewhere else. So Atlanta's not exactly the sort of hot destination that the Lakers are, So I guess I can kind of see where they're coming from if they wanted to give up some assets now, get him in the system, give him an opportunity to play with Trae Young, see what it's like to play with a great passing point guard like that. And maybe he thinks, well, I definitely want to stay the next few years here. This guy's giving me all kinds of open dunks. I think there's logic to it. In terms of like how he would actually fit on the Hawks, I do like it. John Collins, I think, is mobile enough to play some 4, and they won't be stepping on each other's toes in the paint. I think he's stretched his range out a little bit this season. So I'm not terribly concerned about, having too many big guys out there. And then I think Drummond is going to get way more easy looks at the basket than he's ever had if he's playing with Trae Young. Pick and rolls with those two. You start at, 5 feet outside the 3-point line. Guys are going to pay attention to Trae Young because he'll launch from anywhere. And that gives Drummond wide open lanes to the rim. And so from a basketball standpoint, I absolutely get it for Atlanta.
I understand some of the basketball stuff because he is, when you just look at pure fit, it's so hard to find a team in need of a pure 5 that Atlanta, I think, is the default for that. Yeah. I'm not giving up even a pick for him, though, when I can just sign him in free agency. And I know Atlanta isn't the hottest destination, but if you miss out on Andre Drummond, to me, then you miss out on Andre Drummond. I don't know. I think he would cap your ceiling with Collins and Trae Young. Those are 2 defensive liabilities right there. And Andre Drummond has shown that he can move his feet when he wants to anyway, and he hasn't played behind the best perimeter defenders at all when he's been in Detroit. But Atlanta doesn't have many of those right now anyway. Maybe Cam Reddish has been pretty good. DeAndre Hunter is solid, so maybe they continue to develop, but there would need to be more pieces, and I just don't. I know his gravity on the roll is great and that he can rebound, but you're looking at someone who a lot of what he does is predicated on his just physical tools, and when he's going to turn 27 in August, it's going to come a point soon in a couple of years where he just goes on the decline. You'll probably see those rebounding numbers start to drop, and the fact that his minutes on the floor have never unequivocally coincided with a good defense, even with the personnel that have been around him in Detroit. That bothers me a little bit if I were Atlanta. And then the other thing here is I think that, again, you can let it roll into the Dyson free agency, or you can just go a cheaper option, because I don't know that you want to pay $20+ million for this player long term when you look at what it's going to cost you to retain Collins and Young in their extensions, which you have to officially think about. Collins is in year 3. He'll be extension eligible this summer. Trae Young is then a year right behind him. And so they're just a couple years away from their salaries being kicked up. I'd rather them, they've even been linked to Steven Adams. He's a solid fit there as well. I wouldn't go after him either. I'd rather see them see I'd rather see them inquire about Dewayne Dedmon in Sacramento, who already requested a trade, and they never should have given him up in the first place. There are reports that Atlanta misses him in the locker room, and it's like, well, then why did you let him walk in the first place? You could probably get him with really only having to give up filler, would be my guess. Maybe you could talk to Phoenix and see what it would take to get Aaron Baines, who, while good this year, they're not going to make the playoffs, and then to pay him when you have DeAndre Ayton, it gets a little bit weird. And so there just seemed like there might be cheaper options for them to look at, and I think maybe those options don't elevate their ceiling as much, but I don't think Andre Drummond elevates their short-term or long-term ceiling enough to warrant trading for him. And the other thing is, even if you really like him, I'm not a fan of, one, giving up the asset now ahead of free agency, but mostly, two, so you're going to get him and then cheapen the value of this year's draft pick. I don't necessarily understand the logic there.
I think those are all fair points. The Brooklyn Net pick is this year, right?
If they make the playoffs, I think it's lottery protected.
Okay. And this draft, we've, I think, both admitted many times on this podcast that we're not draft experts, but it looks pretty bad to me. So I'm not like losing sleep over that pick. Maybe that's why I'm not an NBA executive. The other thing is, I'm actually on Drummond's age. He's actually younger than I think a lot of people. It feels like he's been in the NBA for a while, and I think it's close to a decade now, but 27 isn't that old. I think he's got 5 years left until a steep decline, and maybe that's, accelerated by an injury or something like that. But I think he's in a pretty good position age-wise. And I think the last thing you said is probably my biggest point is to me, he does more for Atlanta's ceiling than any of those other guys do. And I don't know how much stock we can put into the stuff that happened earlier this year where Trae Young is supposedly demanding more help. Maybe he just needs to be told to be patient, and maybe Andre Drummond isn't the guy that's going to suddenly fix everything. But I think you at least signal to Trae Young that, hey, we are interested in being competitive now. We're interested in making the playoffs. I think the wiser approach is probably to just wait until free agency, because I think there's a little bit more risk built into the trade, but I can see why they would at least explore the possibility.
The price for him seems about right. And if you're Detroit, we should probably talk about their side of this. This does signal to me, at least, that they might be willing to blow it up. There's even been a report that Blake Griffin's going to consider season-ending surgery on that left knee. The price seems right. If I were the Hawks, I wouldn't pay it. And I do think there's arguments that can go both ways. The fact that ownership is involved in this on the Hawks side, though, that doesn't appear to be ever a good sign for me.
No.
But for the Pistons, if Andre Drummond is available, you can assume that everybody's available. Trading Blake Griffin, the ship, at least this season, seems to have sailed. Maybe they would have been able to get
really hard to do.
Right. Maybe they would have been able to get value for him over the summer, even though we saw him dealing with that knee injury in the playoffs. He just had such a good year for them. I think someone would have rolled the dice on him then. But now you're looking at his contract, 2 years and $75.8 million left after this one, and the left knee problems he's dealing with. That's going to be tough to move, even if he's healthy next year, probably. But aside from Drummond, you do have Derrick Rose, who's been playing well this year, and he has another year left in his contract. You have Tony Snell with a player option for $12.2 million. You have a few expirings. Reggie Jackson has been healthy this year. Langston Galloway shot the ball fairly well. And even Markieff Morris, when you just look at what he's shooting from three, maybe there's a team that would be interested in him and his $3.2 million salary. So who do you think is the most likely Piston to be moved this season? Is it Drummond? Is it someone else?
I had the exact same thought you did when those rumors broke, and it was basically, if Drummond's available, then they're completely open for business. I guess if we had to pick two guys that they might not move, it would be maybe like Doumbouya and Kennard.
I'm officially intrigued by Sekou Doumbouya, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there.
And I don't think they would earn like the untouchable label, but I think if somebody's close, it's maybe those two guys. But to answer your actual question, I think Langston Galloway probably gets moved. He's, like you said, he's shooting the ball well this season. I think a lot of teams, shooting is always in pretty high demand, and he's got a very tradable contract. What's Markieff Morris making?
$3.2 million.
Oh, that's very movable too.
With a player option for 3.4 next year, which I would imagine at this point, unless his foot injury is serious, he will decline. That is my guess.
To me, it's honestly kind of hard to put my finger on who is most likely to be moved because, like you said, I think the majority of the roster is probably available. So it's which guys are healthy and playing well, and you could see contributing to a contender. The other thing about Galloway is he's on an expiring contract. Same thing kind of with Morris, although he's got a player option. But with the 2020 free agent class, I can't imagine he's going to accept a $3.4 million player option. So he's basically expiring too. Derrick Rose, he's not expiring, but $7.7 million next year is going to be a very manageable number on the cap that I think is going to be like $116 million or something like that. So it's actually kind of hard to pick one because I think there's a decent number of movable players here.
I think it's Derrick Rose, if only because if you don't trade Andre Drummond to the Hawks, where are you trading Andre Drummond?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah.
And there just seem like there'll be more suitors for Rose. I know some people mentioned the Lakers. I'm not necessarily crazy about him there, although he would be an upgrade over Rondo. Orlando seems like a good fit for him. They're a team that they're not going to give up any long-term pieces. Maybe Aaron Gordon, but you're not going to see them trade Jonathan Isaac, who's now basically out for the year, which sucks, or Chuma Okeke, or maybe even Mo Bamba, but they could probably get Derrick Rose without giving up a core piece, and he's someone who could definitely bolster what's been a very iffy offense all season. So that's a team that might show some interest in him. I think you could even argue that despite his own shaky jumper, that maybe Philly would be a good spot for him just because they do need another playmaker. Not the perfect spot, but I think you could make that case. So there are a few different destinations out there for him, and he would be my Detroit Piston most likely to get moved, unless they all of a sudden decide that, hey, we're going to come back and try and compete next year, which just based off some of the stuff that owner Tom Gores has said would surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, they need to be ready to do an actual rebuild. I feel like I've plugged my own writing more than usual this podcast, but I have written about them recently thinking, and I did some research, and they are just like, I don't know if there's another team in the NBA that says mediocre more than the Pistons over the last 20 years, basically since they won the title, so 15 years. It's time to just blow it up and start fresh, in my opinion.
I'm with you. Kevin Love, been in the rumor mill basically all year just because when he signed the 4-year, $120.4 million extension, of which he's in the first season now, it was kind of fait accompli that he would be moved. A lot of people expected it to happen last year, but then he broke his foot. Saturday, a report comes from the Athletic's Shams Charania that he was fined for his display of emotion when he was on the sideline. Where he bet
wasn't it just a $1,000 fine too?
Right. It felt like if him slapping the chair wasn't captured on camera, it felt like there just wouldn't have been a fine. Like he could have done it if no one saw it. It wouldn't have been an issue. But then there was also apparently he got into a screaming match with GM Kobe Altman over the offseason. And while he posted, and then we saw during their loss on Saturday night where he got mad. Everyone thought it was a Colin Sexton, but head coach John Beilein took the blame for it, saying that Love wanted to post up on CP3, but he didn't see it, and Sexton was holding the ball. He ran over, took it for him, and just beelined it at Chetty Osman, who...
clip was hilarious to me.
Look, kudos to Kevin Love for setting Chetty up for the 3-shot foul. That was just high basketball IQ.
Oh, my God.
It was hysterical. But he posted on Instagram afterwards a picture of him and Colin Sexton together saying he loves his teammates. My whole thing is before the game, he had Mood posted on Instagram with the Joker meme. And then ESPN's Brian Windhurst, who is one of the most plugged in people when it comes to the Cavs, said that Love absolutely wants out of there. And he also mentioned that it was Love and his camp that went to the Cavaliers about the extension after LeBron James left in 2018, which is very interesting. And so the first thing I want to talk about is Love's frustration and how warranted it is. I tend to be very pro player, and I understand why he would be angry. And I also don't think you can fully absolve the Cavaliers of all blame. They obviously promised him, Ty Lue, that they were going to compete. We saw that whole situation with Lue and even J.R. Smith devolve the first season after LeBron left. That being said, Love, maybe the Cavaliers even promised Love that they would move him after signing this deal. Here's the thing. Love broke his foot. That derails a lot right there. I don't know who actually would have traded for him last season. Maybe there would have been a team, but would the Cavs have gotten anything of value in return? Mostly, though, Kevin Love is an intelligible adult. The Cavaliers struggled to win minutes when they had Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love without LeBron. What made him think when he had Jordan Clarkson around him, Colin Sexton coming in, Rodney Hood? What made him think, looking at this roster, that they were going to be fast-tracked to the postseason without both LeBron and Kyrie? And so that's where I fall. And if you're going to sign an extension where this is his fourth contract now, once you get to your third contract, it's harder to sympathize with the frustration because now you've chosen to be there. This isn't you being drafted to be on a rookie scale. And then, yes, you have the right to refuse to sign an extension, but that's your first huge windfall. You're just mostly not going to leave that team. And so you're basically at the behest of the team, really always, but most certainly for those first 7 to 9 years of your career. But once you start signing these third and fourth contracts, it's on you. And so I think Kevin Love, the way he's gone about it, at least with his body language, I don't know what he's doing behind the scenes with his teammates. It does seem like they all still like him. To me, it's just unacceptable, and that's what's a bad look about this.
Yeah, I agree with all that. This is very, very much on Kevin Love. There may be some report out there that says that, they told me we were going to compete. But if he was being honest with himself, he knew that it was going to be a rough road in Cleveland for a while.
And here's the thing. Everyone else has been signing these shorter term contracts. He basically committed to the Cavs for 5 years because of when he signed the extension. And you know why he did that? Because that money wasn't going to be available anywhere else.
And he thought, I'm telling you, he thought that they could trade him. Which is probably what will end up happening. I was chuckling over here while you were talking because I did some simple math. The $1,000 fine of Kevin Love is worth about $1.98 to someone who's making the median U.S. salary. So it's like a cheeseburger from McDonald's, but that's maybe funny to just me. Yeah, the Kevin Love stuff is very much on him. And I think what's maybe not being talked about as much is he's really not helping himself by behaving this way. I know you're not a Seinfeld fan, but there's an episode where he's dying to get fired by the Yankees so that he can get hired by the Mets. They've basically promised him a job, but they said, you got to get fired by the Yankees first. And he just does one outrageous thing after another to try to get fired. And it feels like a comedy almost, what Kevin Love is doing. Like it's a parody. It's like a scene from Semi-Pro. It doesn't feel real. That clip was hilarious to me. It was, I don't know, it just seemed like a farce almost. So I don't think he's doing himself any favors. And on top of, the recent behavior, he's also past his prime. He's got a bunch of injury concerns. The game has maybe played past him a little bit. I mean, he's a stretch four still, but I think most teams want playmaking fours now, and that's just not him. He's going to get burned on the perimeter on defense as long as he's a four. I don't know how many teams are going to be lining up to pay this guy $30 million a year for the next 3 or 4 years. Yeah,
and then that leads us into the next question of who are the suitors for Kevin Love? Because we've talked. It's open and out there that he doesn't want to be there. And this is beforehand. He's just been readily available, it seems, since at least the beginning of the season, even though I believe it was Joe Varden of Cleveland.com, or is he at The Athletic now? I can't remember for some reason. I'm going to double check that because I don't want to get it wrong. He is at The Athletic. Joe Varden said that the Cavaliers had told him that they wanted Kevin Love there. And first of all, he had to know they were rebuilding entering this season. And so if the Cavaliers were telling him behind the scenes that they wanted to keep him and he knew they were rebuilding, then I really don't know what he was expecting this season. But we just haven't had these concrete teams mentioned to him. And I know that the Blazers have been the most popular destination for him. I'm just like, why? They are, since getting Carmelo Anthony, they're 7th in offensive efficiency and 25th in defensive efficiency. Kevin Love, he can play alongside Yusuf Nurkic when he's there, but now you're kind of moving Melo out of his best position for certain minutes, or at least you won't have him as many minutes at the 4, and he's been genuinely good for the Blazers. Still a below average true shooting percentage, but if you're going to get someone who's shooting basically 40% from 3, and scoring over 15 points a game at the money he's making, I call that a win. I just call that a win.
You know who else has been better than expected for them is Whiteside, and that's who they'd have to move to get Kevin Love. I don't know what happens to their defense if they lose him.
Right, and I do hate watching Hassan Whiteside play basketball.
I don't blame you.
You could still get a pathway, though. You could use Kent Bazemore and then filler. The problem there then is, even though Kent Bazemore hasn't been good this season, I don't know. You can't be trading wings for bigs if you're the Blazers. You don't have Rodney Hood right now. You gave up. You didn't re-sign Aminu. You traded Harkless last year. And so it's just so complicated. And then after them, it's like who? Who is trading for Kevin Love? And that's not – I still think Kevin Love is a good player. I just don't know which team goes out and gets him. Maybe it's Miami because I feel like their half-court offense has been a little bit too much of an adventure for me, at least watching them on certain nights. I honestly don't know. I struggle to come up with alternative destinations for him. Do you have any team that might be interesting?
Miami's kind of interesting, but even them, I think they're better when they're playing with Adebayo facilitating from the high post and a bunch of wings running around him. And I just don't know if Kevin Love really fits that mold. I run into this problem every single time I have to write an article about trades. And it's a big guy who's the target. It's so hard to find a lot of logical spots for big guys right now. Most teams already have centers that are at least decent. And then again, Kevin Love is just he's almost like a positional. I don't even know what we call him now. Is he a power forward? Does he make more sense as a center?
He makes more sense as a center, but then you need to have a very specific type of personnel around him to make that work defensively.
I think he has huge problems, whatever position you put him at. And when you attach the salary, it just becomes really, really difficult to find a logical destination for him.
Right. I know one of the more popular scenarios has been Tyler Johnson and Dario Saric for Kevin Love. Maybe Phoenix considers that, but I don't know. I mean, we've seen Ayton and Baines play together this season. I think the Suns have actually fared, last time I checked, pretty well defensively in those minutes. That might be me speaking out of turn, though. I haven't checked in a couple days. That being said, Kevin Love and DeAndre Ayton is very shaky. Kevin Love and Aaron Baines works. I just don't know. Is Phoenix, close enough to this season's playoff picture where it makes sense to?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you're not giving up much in that scenario, except for the fact that you're locking yourself into Kevin Love for the next 3.5 seasons. And who's to say he just doesn't become disenchanted there extremely quickly?
Yeah. That no one is to say that because that's a very real possibility.
I do think if the Spurs are serious about shooting more threes, which it sort of seems like over their last 7 games that they are, Kevin Love on the Spurs would intrigue me. I know Aldridge has slipped defensively.
That's like very Spurs for their last 3 or 4 years that they've operated.
Right. I mean, do they want to lock themselves into the rest of the deal? That's a fair question too. But they would be a destination I'd actually like to see him go to.
It'll be that'll be a very, very fascinating one to figure out.
Sacramento's also been mentioned. I don't know why though. I don't. You have Richaun Holmes has been good, but you have Bagley as well, and Bielitsa's been pretty good. You could probably get him without assuming the Cavs are ready to just sell at this point. Maybe you get him without giving up much. Is it Bogey and Ariza or Bogey and Dewayne Dedmon or something? I don't know what the framework is there, but he doesn't make too much sense there to me either.
No, I think my answer for probably most potential Kevin Love spots is he doesn't make a ton of sense there. Portland was the one that seemed good for a while, and even that has, for all the reasons you already mentioned, it doesn't make
Marvin Williams makes more sense for Portland than Kevin Love.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
That's all I have on the rumor front. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, what an interesting spot for Kevin Love's career to wind up where we can logically say Marvin Williams makes more sense.
Look, Kevin Love's the better player. It's just so hard to find a fit for him right now, which I think speaks more to the direction of the league and just how many bigs there are under contract at the moment.
For sure. Well, you did a great job of taking us through the NBA rumor mill, Dan. Thank you. If you want to discuss any of these rumors or other rumors that have cropped up or will crop up, you can find us on Twitter. Dan's at Dan Favale, Favale. I'm at Andrew D. Bailey. The show is at Hardwood Knocks, the podcast network at Blue Wire Pods. As always, we encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you've already done that, tell your friends, family, neighbors, and acquaintances to do so. And until next time, we leave you with the shout out to Beno Udrih and Kyle Anderson.